Good morning.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 5th annual Future of Transportation and Mobility Series Conference. My name is Richard Dunda. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Integrated Transportation and Mobility, one of the co-sponsors and presenters of this event with my colleague Sherry. I am very pleased to welcome you here today. And if you've registered for one of the in-person networking events, either in Hamilton this afternoon or in Oshawa this afternoon, we look forward to seeing you there as well. We have an awesome lineup for this year's event with a variety of speakers from across the automotive, transportation, and energy industry, some interesting panel discussions, and some thought-provoking comments as well. And with that, I will say welcome again and hand the stage over to Sherry.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Sherry Colburn, President and CEO of the Spark Center. Spark Center is the lead of the Durham Regional Technology Development Site. We are one of 17 regional innovation centers across Ontario, and we are a co-host of today's event. The Durham RTDS is made up of core partners, Spark Center, Ontario Tech University, Durham College, and the region of Durham. And I would just like to say that as a municipally focused consortium, we are really bringing municipal challenges to the center of community adoption and providing both local and international startups the opportunity to help us move the advancement of connected, electric, and smart mobility solutions forward. To kick us off today, we have a warm welcome from the Honourable Vic Fedeli, the Minister of the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to welcome everyone to the 5th annual Future of Transportation and Mobility series. It should come as no surprise to hear new technologies are transforming our auto sector, our economy, and the future of transportation and mobility. These sectors are being reinvented around a future that is connected, autonomous, and electric. Today's event provides an important opportunity to discuss the future of Ontario's innovative transportation and mobility sectors. Ontario is well positioned to meet that future and lead the world in developing and manufacturing next generation technologies. We've invested more than $141 million to support research and development funding, talent development, technology acceleration, business and technical supports, and testing and demonstration. Ontario is proud to be home to more than 300 companies and organizations pioneering connected and autonomous vehicle technologies. Our advantage is the diversity of our economy with world-class tech startups, globally relevant clusters in automotive, advanced manufacturing, information technology, clean tech, and mining. These advantages, together with strategic investments, ensure a competitive economy that creates jobs, opportunity, and growth. Over the last 2 years alone, the province's dynamic business climate, flourishing innovation ecosystem, and skilled workforce have attracted $16 billion in automotive-related investments, including more than $12.5 billion focused on electric vehicle and EV battery-related manufacturing. We will leverage our critical mineral wealth throughout Ontario's north, which will support a broader supply chain that includes mining and refining the minerals needed for electric vehicle batteries. The integration of technology and transportation will allow us to transform the transportation and mobility sectors over the next several decades. Now, more than ever, we need to continue working together for the benefit of businesses, workers, and communities so we can shape the future of these sectors. Ontario's thriving auto tech ecosystem stands with the best in the world. The sector is undergoing a significant shift, and we are proud that Ontario is right at the forefront of that shift. Thank you. Have a great event.
Thank you, Minister Fedeli. I think it's sufficient to say that there are a lot of exciting things going on in Ontario's auto tech sector. With that, I'm going to hand off to our MC for the day, Chris Gillis, Manager of Applied Research Business Development at Durham College. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Sherry, and good morning. Love how things opened up. And as you said, Minister Fedeli's message is certainly filled with a lot of good news for Ontario. Also, I just want to note that thanks to the miracle of virtual, we have about 280 some odd registrants for today's event, covering over 17 countries, some of those being Denmark, Ghana, Iran, Singapore, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, UK, and US. So that's very exciting to see. And I'd like to welcome our international audience. And really, I'm looking forward to having a really great day, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. As Richard and Sherry said, we've got a number of I think, really great speakers. But just before we actually kick things off officially, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. And although our event is virtual, we would like to acknowledge the land and its origins. We recognize that our work and the work of our community and industry partners takes place on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We are thankful to be able to work and live in these territories, and we're thankful to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have cared for these territories since time immemorial and who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and to all communities across the province. So, as I said, I'm very excited to hear from our expert speakers today. And as Sherry and Richard indicated, this event is co-hosted by CITM, Center for Integrated Transportation and Mobility out of Hamilton and the Durham Regional Technology Development Site in Durham. And we also have sponsors who I'd like to thank, specifically the City of Hamilton, Invest Durham, and the Regional Municipality of Durham. So just a reminder, you're currently watching the main stage, and I'd like to remind everyone we'll have two presentations that will take place here. Following that, we will have an expert panel discussion, and then somewhere around 11:15, we'll instruct you to navigate to a different area of the platform for two concurrent sessions. Again, reminder that this is a hybrid event, so the morning being virtual, and that there are two networking sessions, one being held in Hamilton, one being held in Oshawa. Directions for those are in the website for the event, and if you want to attend the networking but you forgot to actually register, please drop your name in the chat on the side, and we can get you registered that way. Also, we will be taking questions from the audience. So throughout the event, if you have questions, again, please drop those in the comments section on the right hand of your screen, and we'll endeavor to take those during or after, rather, in the Q&A sessions for our presentations and panels. If you would like further information on our speakers or other event information, then that's also available on the information website. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Stephen Beatty, Vice President Corporate of Toyota Canada. And he's going to be speaking on what does transportation look like in 20 to 30 years. So Stephen, I'm very excited to welcome you to the stage and hear what you have to say on this interesting topic.
Hey, listen, thank you, Chris. You mentioned that you have a number of really exciting, entertaining, expert guest speakers today. You also have me. And so I just want to say good morning, everybody, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. Really, this is an incredibly interesting time to be alive. It's a time of enormous challenges as well as sweeping technological changes. And it's also a time of widespread consensus that societies need to work together to create a more sustainable future. But views vary widely on what form that future should take. Here in Canada, we're a highly mobile and broadly distributed society, one that reaps many lifestyle and economic benefits from personal transportation. But we also face specific challenges due to our weather and geography. And the greater these challenges, the more that we need to bring together talented people to propose and discuss solutions. And frankly, I think that's why this conference is so important. But it's also why I woke up this morning questioning whether I should be the person to give the opening keynote and attempt to set the tone of the meeting. I've been asked to offer some thoughts about what transportation will look like in 20 to 30 years. And I'm old enough now to be considered a senior representative of the Canadian auto industry in every sense of that word. At my age, I've seen some predictions come and go. I may even have made a few myself. But the reality is that nothing ever turns out quite the way you think it will. Yet some people come to be seen as incredibly accurate in their forecasts of the future. Well, I think there's a secret to this. And the secret to being an oracle is to make a lot of predictions and to keep them as vague as possible. This increases the chance that people will remember you said something that sort of lines up with the eventual outcome, and presto, you're a genius. So, how good am I at taking my own advice? Well, I learned my lesson early on. Straight out of university, I went up to Ottawa in 1979 to work for a federal politician. We were in the middle of yet another oil crisis, and the Prime Minister appointed an advisory committee on energy to plot a future course for Canada. A couple decades after that, I found a dusty copy of our report, and I was reminded that we predicted the birth of the hydrogen economy. The report concluded in 1979 that there would be a transformative energy revolution within 20 years. So here we are, more than 40 years since that report was published, and now it finally seems as though the hydrogen revolution is about to get underway. Hydrogen hubs are being built across Canada and around the world. So my takeaway from this is our prediction was solid. Our mistake was putting a date on it. Now, if we look at the history of transportation, it's littered with examples of wildly inaccurate predictions. When I was a kid, magazines like Popular Mechanics proclaimed that we'd soon zoom around in flying cars, that we were going to become real-life Jetsons families. And when I visited the automotive building at the CNE in Toronto, I could see firsthand an amphibious car floating in a water tank. In the early 1960s, this half-car, half-boat amphicar sitting beside Lake Ontario was the next big thing in motoring, at least in my boyhood mind. So how's all of that worked out? Well, the company I work for, Toyota Canada, is actually the last full-line automaker in this country. But even our extensive catalog of vehicles doesn't yet include a flying car. And while we do offer an extensive range of hybrids, none of them are of the car-boat variety. Automotive designers and engineers can do almost anything, and they have a good track record of creating commercially successful products. But there's also a good chance that if they stretch too far, they're going to end up with something that's both a bad car and a bad boat. And I shudder to think of the consequences of a bad flying car. Now, having said that, we're actually working on flying cars, and here's one concept that Toyota's actually involved with. So this is my caveat. I can't predict. I can only guess. But that said, I've worked for a major global automaker for more than 20 years, so I think I can make some educated guesses. And my first is that I'm confident that the current trends in transportation are going to continue. And that's because the need to move is a basic human requirement. Here's another bold prediction. And remember, you heard it here first. Given a choice, most Canadians will continue to demand personalized transportation options. Mass transit, of course, has its place, and it's going to continue to be important in the future. But if I offer you the choice or the option of having to go somewhere to access transportation and then to be packed in like a tin of sardines, or to have transportation at your personal disposal where and when you want it, I think there's a high probability I'll be able to predict what your choice will be. The magic of the automobile is that it's enabled people to choose the lifestyle they want and a location where they want to live. And this has become even more important and achievable in today's more flexible work environment. So yes, there are ample opportunities to build more public transit, but I think there are even greater opportunities to make personal transportation better for everyone and for the planet. Now, it all starts with technology. as everybody knows, automakers have embraced electrification, automation, connectivity, and we're going to continue to improve all three. But as I'll explain over the next few minutes, it's still unclear exactly how Canadians will take advantage of these advancements in technology. So let me touch on each of these, starting with electrification. One of the challenges we've faced is that people tend to talk about electrification as the end goal, and it isn't. It's just one possible means to get to our true common goal. What we're really talking about is carbon neutrality, the decarbonization of transportation. And though this can be achieved in many different ways, battery electric vehicles, or BEVs, have dominated the discussion today. And I do expect that 20 to 30 years from now, we're going to see lots more BEVs on the road. Toyota is already showing off more than a dozen BEV concepts, but here comes the prediction. BEVs will not be the only solution, regardless of what their champions say. And there's several reasons for this. The infrastructure to support BEVs is a real challenge. There simply aren't enough charging stations. And for city dwellers who park on the street, in-neighborhood charging is usually not available. Not to mention the challenge for the massive number of Canadians who live in older apartment or condo buildings without charging stations. Meantime, Canadians living in rural or remote areas will continue to worry about the range of a BEV, especially in the winter, and definitely if you use your vehicle to tow. And if you want an extreme example of that, just visit a prairie province in February and drive even 30 minutes outside of a major city, or drive one of the ice roads in Canada's Northern Territories. There's a whole lot of out there. And if your BEV runs out of charge, you could be waiting a long time for someone to drive by with a jerry can full of electrons. But there's an even bigger issue. Even if these smaller problems are solved, Canada's electricity grid already struggles with the demands placed on it today. It's simply not yet up to the task of also charging several million vehicles. And there's a very real concern about resiliency. This year alone, extreme weather events have caused major power outages in several provinces. In September, for example, Tropical Storm Fiona knocked out power to more than 500,000 customers in Atlantic Canada. 80% of customers in Nova Scotia lost their power, and 2 weeks later, tens of thousands of customers were still waiting for the lights to come back on. Climate scientists have now warned that going forward, we're going to have to grapple with more frequent and more severe weather events. And so, given that context, I have to ask, if you're going to tackle something as big and as complex as the climate emergency, why would you risk everything on a single technology? Another issue is the battery itself. The global demand for battery materials is huge and extends beyond the auto industry to everything from commercial industrial applications to computers and mobile phones. When we talk about the inputs to electric vehicle manufacturing, not just the battery, but also the specialized materials used in electric motors rather, the issue is not the abundance of strategic minerals available on Earth. The problem is that those materials are not readily available to manufacturers today. And as a separate risk, control over those supplies rests in a few hands. Mining companies can't extract and process them fast enough to meet demand, nor can manufacturers keep up with the pressure to create and distribute finished products. And supply chains just can't ramp up fast enough. And as we've seen over the past couple of years, global manufacturing supply chains are also fragile. Remember the Ever Given? In March of 2021, this container ship got wedged in the Suez Canal. The Ever Given blocked $400 million worth of goods per hour. Now, it was only stuck for 6 days, but that single ship affected $10 billion worth of trade. And that one brief incident was felt throughout the global supply chain for several months afterwards. The consequences of all of this, well, it's going to be a huge challenge to satisfy the current demands by regulators for zero-emission battery electric vehicles. And it's not a challenge that's going to be solved anytime soon. So I encourage everyone to stop talking about electrification and to start talking about carbon neutrality. After all, that's the outcome we're really trying to achieve. BEVs are important, but there are many viable alternatives that also deliver high levels of efficiency and zero or reduced emissions. Hydrogen-powered fuel cell electric vehicles, such as Toyota's Mirai, are one part of that solution. So are direct combustion hydrogen vehicles. So is replacing your current gas-powered vehicle with an advanced hybrid or plug-in hybrid model, and so are low-carbon fuels. In October, Toyota introduced its flex fuel hybrid vehicle to India. India's got a huge challenge with air pollution, and transportation is a major contributor to that. Meanwhile, India's notoriously poor electrical grid makes full battery electric vehicles, well, a non-starter. So our flex fuel Corolla, which can run on anywhere from 20% to 100% ethanol, could be a game changer. For many people, a liquid fuel hybrid with little or no carbon emissions would be ideal. Even more intriguing is the possibility of synthetic fuels, blending green hydrogen with carbon captured from the air. These fuels are a direct substitute for gasoline currently used in internal combustion engines. So in other words, not only would they clean up future vehicles, but they're also the only solution that would allow vehicles currently in use to radically transform their carbon profile. Now, you may have read some stories recently about the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States and other legislative and regulatory provisions designed to kickstart the battery electric vehicle supply chain in the US and wrestle control of EV minerals and technology away from China. Canada has had a minerals to mobility advantage in this space, but these recent American actions have neutralized or at least called that strategy into question. Frankly, if nothing changes, it's going to be difficult to develop a comprehensive battery electric vehicle supply chain in Canada in the next few years, certainly not in time for the next round of zero emission vehicle mandates. So if Canada wants to establish itself in this market, I think we need to consider some of the alternatives. One option is to realize that the US focuses on light duty vehicles. So maybe we should switch our attention to buses, commercial vehicles, and heavy duty trucks, where Canada has a significant domestic market potential. Another is to invest in alternative technologies like low carbon internal combustion or hydrogen fuel cell technology. And there's another potential consequence, I think, of the actions being taken south of the border. We may be headed into a period of short supply driven by regulatory and trade policy. Every constraint applied to a supply chain also constrains production. In short, in turn, short supply means sustained lack of choice and higher prices. And that, of course, is inconsistent with Canada's desire to democratize cleaner vehicle technology and make it accessible and affordable to the driving public. So in a world where Canada's population is expected to continue to grow, in a world where we need to replace higher emission vehicles with cleaner alternatives, and in a world where Canadians still need access to affordable transportation, here's what I predict will happen. Ride hailing and other forms of pay-per-use vehicle sharing are going to expand in urban areas as the 2 or 3 car family becomes less affordable. This outcome would mean fewer vehicles sitting idle. You'd encourage more efficient use of vehicles, but still allow people to move outside of limited mass transit corridors. Last kilometer or neighborhood options are also going to expand, enabled by smaller, less expensive vehicles. And because they're designed for relatively short range driving, they can employ smaller battery packs, helping to alleviate the current battery supply chain problems. And vehicles are going to stay on the road longer in order to smooth the replacement and permit fleet growth. Repairing, rebuilding, or upgrading vehicles become more important and easier in cases where vehicle functions can be upgraded through software. Ultimately, Canadians looking for better ways to control their transportation costs are going to drive innovation. Now, frankly, we all budget for transportation as part of our monthly basic basket of goods and services, and we all want to make that money go further. The good news is that the auto industry and its customers are already doing a lot to make that happen, and these include new ownership models, changes in vehicle design to reduce cost and improve efficiency, and the adoption of alternative technologies that allow different types of low emissions vehicles to be offered in volume at competitive prices. But paradoxically, the biggest threat to the future of the battery electric vehicle may actually be public policy impacts that force manufacturers and drivers to seek out alternatives to battery electric vehicles in a supply constrained world. Now, the script for that future is being written today, and the outlook today, frankly, is very different from even 6 months ago. Well, that's a whole lot about making transportation carbon neutral, and I still have 2 more topics to cover. So let's move on to the next technology, automation. This is another example of how societies have not done a good job of predicting the future. Just 5 years ago, many people expected our streets would be full of self-driving vehicles by now. Yes, there are examples of driverless vehicles on the road today. In fact, just a few weeks ago, a grocery store chain deployed its first self-driving delivery trucks in the Greater Toronto area. And this happened after extensive testing with a human monitor on board. This is an important experiment, but a half dozen trucks is a far cry from where some pundits thought we would be by now. Now, don't get me wrong, fully autonomous vehicles will happen. It's just going to take time. At Toyota, we've performed many autonomous vehicle experiments and will offer self-driving vehicles when two important conditions are met. First, the market conditions have to be right, and they're not yet. And second, the technology has to be ready and it has to be foolproof, and it's not yet. There are many practical reasons for this, and perhaps the most important one is the way people use their vehicles is actually really complex. Therefore, it's taking longer than anyone expected to work through all of the technologies that are required. This is made even more challenging by the range of driving conditions that Canadians encounter, and because autonomous vehicles have to share the road with many other users, including vehicles with few or no automation technologies. Now, beyond cars and trucks, think about what you might encounter on an average drive. There are motorcycles, e-bikes and bicycles, people on skateboards, inline skates, and of course, people on foot. But there's good news on this front. First, there have already been many advances in vehicle automation, and the technologies that will eventually enable fully self-driving cars also enable us to extend a human driver's capabilities right now. And in that application, these technologies are ready today. As an example, every new vehicle that we build includes a bundle of what could be considered autonomous vehicle technologies. We don't use the word autonomous because we don't use them to try to replace the driver. Instead, we market these as active safety technologies. They enhance driver awareness and decision-making to improve the safety envelope around the car. Depending on what you drive, the bundle is either called Toyota Safety Sense or Lexus Safety System Plus, and we've enhanced these technologies almost every year since introducing them back in 2015. Our safety bundles include pre-collision systems, lane keeping assistance, dynamic radar cruise control, automatic high beam functions, even windshield wipers that sense rain and turn themselves on. And these technologies work together to help drivers identify and avoid collisions and to improve the outcome when a collision does occur. But for now anyway, the most important thing to us is that the driver remains in control. Automation also integrates with the third pillar of vehicle technology, connectivity. Currently, the auto industry tends to describe connectivity in terms of services it offers to vehicle owners. But the connected services we're building today also enable us to basically turn any of our vehicles into shared assets. We can use a digital key on a mobile phone to validate the driver and then unlock and start the vehicle. For fleet operators and individual drivers, this enables new ownership and service models that were impossible even just 3 or 4 years ago. And here's where my educated guesses start to come together. Now, the image that you're looking at right now is the Toyota e-Pallet. It's an autonomous, connected, electrified, people-moving vehicle that was demonstrated at the Olympic Games in Japan a few years ago. If ride-hailing and other shared services are going to play a bigger role in how people get around, I think there's a huge advantage to building automated and connected systems into every vehicle. These technologies are going to permit both consistent and highly personalized experiences as people move from one vehicle to another. They'll facilitate payment. They'll generate new efficiencies by smoothing traffic flow, maximizing individual vehicle use, and promoting safer transportation. And frankly, as long as it's affordable, low emission, and provides people with the right vehicle for them when they want it, I think these options could satisfy the transportation needs for many people living in, working in, or visiting cities. There isn't, of course, time today to get into our point of view on how the industry is going to proceed toward fully autonomous vehicles and how long that's going to take, but I do just want to take a moment to say this. While fully autonomous vehicles might represent our moonshot, that single big leap where everything has to work perfectly in order to succeed, it's also possible to have a strategy of building an increasingly taller ladder that gets us closer and closer to our objective. At Toyota, we're doing both. We're working on 2 modes of automated vehicle operation. The first is our chauffeur mode, where eventually you'll be able to sit back and let the vehicle do all the driving. And the second is our guardian mode, where the car becomes your driving partner, helping to extend your abilities and enhance your driving experience. One of the biggest challenges in closing the distance between partially and fully autonomous vehicles is the need to maintain driver awareness in case control needs to shift quickly from vehicle systems back to the driver. The more automated the experience, the more distracted drivers tend to become. To date, we use internal cameras, feedback from vehicle steering, and other data to determine whether the driver is actively engaged with the vehicle. If they aren't, we use various warning devices to alert the driver to look at the road or grip the steering wheel. But what if, instead of relying on these simple systems, we took a more sophisticated approach that incorporates advanced artificial intelligence into the vehicle? I spend most of my seat time doing long distance driving outside of the city. If you had a camera link into my vehicle, you'd see that I'm a big user of voice controls to operate vehicle functions and to communicate with the outside world. And as a shameless plug, our Toyota voice assistant works pretty well. But some of the others, well, let's just say it's not uncommon for me to see somebody arguing with a disembodied voice while driving through rural Ontario. But if executed properly, an intelligent system that supplements existing onboard systems with an interactive voice could go a very long way toward enhancing driver alertness and reducing unsafe driving. And I predict that you're going to see great advances in this space very soon. As we boost the technology in our vehicles, new innovations will present themselves that will also have implications beyond the vehicle itself. So let me give you an example. Weather networks are really good at providing people with high-level weather predictions, and our connectivity systems relay that information directly to the driver. But what the networks aren't so good at is at determining exactly what's happening on the ground in a specific location at a specific time. However, the intelligence and connectivity built into our vehicles today allow many onboard systems to be monitored, even the little things. In Japan, Toyota has entered into an agreement with Weather News. We're doing verification testing to provide the Weather News service with data on windshield wiper use by vehicle location. The data collected is anonymized to protect the identity of the vehicle and the driver, while still providing Weather News with detailed information about where it's actually raining. So the takeaway from all of this is this: Toyota didn't build our in-vehicle communication systems with weather forecasting in mind. This test is happening because we made the technology available and because people started thinking about what they could do with it. Outcomes are often unimaginable until the technology is in place. And that's the thinking behind a Toyota project in Japan called Woven City. This is a full-size town, a hydrogen-powered, data-connected, and highly automated community that we're building from scratch at the base of Mount Fuji. Toyota broke ground on Woven City in February of 2021. Among other things, we think that Woven City is going to be a proving ground for Toyota's ideas about the future of sustainable mobility. And what makes this experiment unique is that the people who will live there are the same scientists who are doing the research. The residents will be experts in electrification, automation, connectivity, and other related fields. And the idea here basically is to set smart people loose in a smart community and see what happens. We expect to be pleasantly surprised. What we already know is that as technology changes and evolves, the big variable is how people will use that technology. And I can predict that in 20 to 30 years, people will still need to move around. That's not going to change. But the ways in which we're going to move about will certainly change. Nobody can predict such outcomes. The world's just too complex. And it's why central planning by any level of government or by private enterprise has never been able to magically make everybody's lives better. It hasn't worked in the past. It's not going to work in the future. And it's because as societies, we're not very good at managing complexity. Even the most carefully planned approach can't anticipate and account for every scenario and every variable. So I think the task or the challenge is this: let's set broad societal goals and then encourage people to compete to develop innovations to achieve those goals. Among other things, that's going to require a regulatory environment based on outcomes rather than on specific technologies. And instead of dictating powertrain technology, let's set sustainability targets and then set loose the engineers to figure out new unexpected ways to meet them. Let's continue to push the envelope of what our autonomous and connected vehicle technologies can do to make driving safer and more enjoyable. And then let's encourage people to use their imaginations and their skills to leverage those technologies. I predict the result will be new, creative, and superior ways to achieve our desired outcomes. And maybe in the process, somebody will come up with a compelling reason to make boats that become cars or cars that become airplanes. But more realistically, I think what will happen is people will come up with creative, sustainable mobility solutions that do all the things we need to do today, namely move ourselves, our families, our friends, our stuff, all through our daily lives. And in the process, these inventors are going to empower us to make our own lifestyles and life stage choices, even as we work together to address the climate emergency and other social problems. I might be wrong. I hope I'm not, because I think that's a pretty good future. Anyway, thank you. And maybe this is a good time for me to throw it back to Chris and open it up to questions and answers.
Great. And thank you so much, Stephen, for those insights and thoughts. I think you really maybe have reframed this whole situation in a very interesting way. And I know you've got me thinking about a lot of things and a couple questions I may have for you. But I think what we'll do is we have a couple in the chat from the audience. And maybe I'd like to go to those and see if you could maybe, again, provide some interesting insights there. Let's see. So the question basically asks, you'd mentioned something around hydrogen fuel being only substitute for existing vehicles. I don't really think you said the only, but certainly one of them. And the question really is around lowering the carbon footprint. Can the retrofit for, I guess, is there a hydrogen retrofit for ICE vehicles? And are they commercially deployed already? So I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
So I think a hydrogen two things. One, you could retrofit a vehicle to burn hydrogen, and I will tell you right now that on the World Rally circuit and on racing circuits in Japan, we're currently racing internal combustion hydrogen vehicles. But frankly, I think that'll be an expensive alternative to do the retrofit when instead you could be creating synthetic low carbon fuels. I think that's the path for really cleaning up the vehicles that are on the road today. And frankly, it's not just vehicles. I mean, think of everything powered by gasoline. Our carbon emissions in Canada, we talk about light duty transportation rather, as being the major carbon source. The reality of it is that's not new vehicles. That's every vehicle on the road, 26 million vehicles. And it's an equation that we talk about as carbon kilometers traveled. In other words, how many vehicles, what's their efficiency, and how far do they travel? That'll tell you, the magnitude of the carbon problem you've got. So if you could clean up that fuel supply, you can tackle the problem today, all while you're working on moving new technologies in the marketplace that are cleaner and have other benefits as we move forward.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, I think a point that I picked up from your presentation that really resonated with me was that just really how unclear the path forward to the future is on this, and there will be quite a number of I guess options that we need to really look at and leverage as we move forward. And I really like how you reframed it. It's really about really carbon neutrality is really the end game here, because I think I guess the majority of people I've had a chance to talk to, many people are thinking this is just EVs will replace ICE type vehicles, but that's not really the case in all of this, right?
It's going to be very difficult for that to happen for a couple of reasons. One, just the supply chain doesn't exist, at the capacity level that we need today to be able to meet the types of targets that we're setting for ourselves as societies, and it's made more difficult by the U.S. drive to localize all of that production. But again, realistically, one of the issues that we're confronting as an auto industry is this: other forms of technology tend to get cheaper as you move through iterations of technology, as you manufacture and scale. The problem with a battery is the majority of its value is in the materials that go into it. And so if you have an exponential increase in demand for battery materials, what's happening is that the cost is going up. So it's a supply and demand problem, and so even if I didn't think it was a mistake to bet everything on a single solution, I think there are some very practical constraints that we're going to have to deal with. So the flip side of that is Canada has a lot of intellectual property in the space of hydrogen technology, of low carbon fuels, of all sorts of other types of innovations, and I think we need to be pursuing all of those. Because who knows where the where the actual winners are going to be. And frankly, as you're choosing between different modes of transportation, one type of technology will have an advantage over another.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I think you highlighted a number of factors that we've certainly seen and I guess started to figure out a bit throughout COVID was the supply chain interruptions and of course unexpected political factors in all of this have really rippled throughout I think the planet in terms of everything we're trying to do. It's a very complex sort of path forward. I'm just going to go to the second question here, which is a little bit of a shift, and it's more on the technology side of things. And someone is asking because you gave a couple examples of some really interesting applications of the autonomous driving, not Jetson yet, but they're really asking, what is the accuracy of autonomous systems at this point? And the person's asking, how are they safe enough to start using, or kind of where is that? So maybe I'll let you kind of play with that one a little bit, Stephen. Is what do you think the state of the technology is, and how should we maybe be using it?
So we've had autonomous technology that works well in sort of geo-fenced areas under ideal conditions for quite some time. And I think back to going to a world exposition in Japan back in the early part of the 2000s, and we were showing autonomous buses being run around the fairgrounds at the time. Now that system relied on pucks actually being dropped into the roadway so that the vehicle could talk to infrastructure. And here's where that model sort of fell apart. And it was that all of the things that constrain investments in public transit and constrain investments in infrastructure of that sort. So what's actually driven the change is the amount of computing power that's available in the car, as well as satellite technology to allow for geopositioning of vehicles. And certainly with 5G technologies, with other vehicle to vehicle communications that are going to come up, it's going to become more and more accurate. And even in the next few months, expect to see, for example, a kind of low speed autonomous system that we would refer to as traffic jam assist, which would be virtually any hour on the Don Valley Parkway, where the vehicle will stay in its lane and speed up, slow down according to the traffic around it. We think that's a sort of ideal solution in a place where the driving experience really isn't very rewarding. Vehicle technology can help out there, but I really think in the short term, look to those sorts of automatic or autonomous functions to help extend driver capabilities or ability, not to replace the driver.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for that. And I think point two that I've noticed in all this, when you start thinking about automation and just how complex it actually is, as you mentioned, you also realize the crazy things we as people do in our vehicles that we hope we get to automation sooner than later. But just maybe one last question here as we kind of come towards the end of this, that I'd like to go back to kind of the path forward, because you brought up a number of, I thought, extremely interesting things. You talked about the sort of intellectual capital that Canada has. You talked about how the future is likely unclear in terms of the path, and we have to do a number of things now to start to understand how we go forward. And I think what I also see out there is I think there's a large part of the population that sees this as this is for OEMs, the manufacturers, to actually solve. But as you talked about the city in Japan, and a lot of things. This is way beyond just the manufacturers. There are a lot of other players out there that need to be involved. And the reason I ask this is both the CITM and Durham, one of the approaches that we're taking to try to help in this area is really to get municipalities, communities to identify mobility challenges and then open that up to the technology providers. So what I'm kind of curious about, and my question actually, Stephen, is as we go forward in this, what sort of things do communities, governments, what should they also be doing to aid in this path forward, to assist manufacturers and technology makers, providers in helping us sort of navigate this unclear path forward?
So I would say a couple of things. One is it's not just about technology; it's also about new types of services using those technologies. So in other words, I think we're very good at coming up with technology. We're always surprised, however, about the way people put it into
Mhm.
use. And if I'm right about having more shared use vehicles, then even right down to municipal bylaws allowing cars to be parked anywhere, um, so that shared use vehicles can be easily accessible. Those are the sorts of things we have to look at. We have to look at zoning laws to make sure that charging infrastructure is in place in new buildings. But beyond that, um, it's I think one of the most innovative municipalities that I've seen um, is Edmonton. And right now, they're engaged with the Edmonton International Airport and building out a hydrogen hub. Um, notwithstanding the fact that they're in Alberta, this is green hydrogen we're talking about. It's not a byproduct of the oil industry. And they're looking to use um, the concentration of transportation around the airport in order to create critical mass, both for hydrogen production, but also for the deployment of different types of technology, whether that's tugs at the airport or taxis servicing the community, or, well, you name it, heavy duty trucks. Um, and what they're increasingly doing is sort of inviting people to come to challenge themselves and to open up new ways of thinking about things. The intriguing thing about the airport is it's a very large geographic space,
Mhm.
and under provincial law, it's actually its own municipality.
Mm.
So on the airport grounds, you can test vehicle automation and other activities in a way that you often can't in other municipal locations across the country. So I think they have done a lot of really interesting things on the ground to try to create the conditions that are necessary for innovation. And I say that not just as an OEM. I think there are lots of other people who are looking at how do you build services around it. What's the economic model that makes this all work? And so I think we're all in this together, frankly. And if I were to hazard a guess as to one other area where Canada could be a leader, we talk a lot about connected vehicle technologies and low emission vehicle technologies in urban areas. But back to my comment that there's a whole lot of out there. Um, Nobody has got good solutions yet for people who are living in rural and remote locations, and yet we've got a lot of Canadians who rely on transportation
Mhm.
as their connection to the rest of the country. And so we need to look at those options, because frankly, Canada is not the only place where infrastructure can be a challenge. So I think there are lots of things we can do. There's lots of opportunity. And what are the limits? Well, it comes down to our imaginations, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you again for agreeing to join us today and give us some of your insights and maybe challenge some of our notions and how we're looking at all of this. I'm sure we could probably talk for hours on end on this, but I think maybe for today we'll leave it there. So thank you so much, Steve, for being part of our event.
Thank you, and thanks everybody. Have a great conference.
Great, thank you.